So if you're listening to this recording, you missed my introduction, which was brief. You missed the acknowledgement, and my thanks for Denise and Susan, my colleagues who make this stuff happen. So let's just start in and launch. I guess we can say that. I want to say also that this book was chosen for a number of reasons. One, because this is Women's History Month, and because Kathryn Sullivan was one of the first six women in the shuttle program, the space program at NASA. Also, we're only 3 days short of Pi Day on Sunday. If we round to the nearest 10th, 3.1, we're at 3.11, so we'll call this an early Pi Day. And in celebration of Pi Day, we wanted to find a book that not only was by or about women, but that celebrated STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, math. So we've got a Pi Day celebration, we've got a Women's History Month celebration, and we've got a wonderful book that we can talk about. So I'll start with an easy question. Did you like the book? Don't all jump up at once. Maybe I should start with an easier one. Did you read the book? I know some of you haven't, and that's fine. You'll gain something and you'll get some good pointers on where to go for information.
It's the one with the important, I think it's the first one, yeah.
Well, I can chime in, Mark.
Okay.
I read most of it. I skimmed.
I don't even know what the book we're talking about. Wait, who is the woman who just asked my last name?
Hi, I'm just. Are you Kayla? Hi, I'm just. Are you in our? Are you getting credit from a teacher for coming today?
Yeah.
Okay, that's why I needed your last name. That's the only reason I was asking. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I did read, I read most of it. Some of the descriptions where she's talking about the real engineer nerd stuff, like fixing a widget or a certain piece that needed to be repaired or fixed. That part I skimmed over, but I thought her life story was amazing. All the things that she set out to do and she did, and she's probably not done. So that was kind of my overall thought.
Yeah, and when she retired from NASA in 1993, she held several positions at NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric. Is that right? Yeah, because her initial training was as a oceanographer. And after she retired from, and she ended up being the head of NOAA for a while during the Obama administration. I think she's predominantly retired now. She's of an age when at least she's able to retire. She is also the only person on the planet who has ever been in orbit and been to the deepest point in the ocean, the Challenger Deep, which she was invited to do when she was working for NOAA after she retired as an astronaut. So very interesting history and involvement in various aspects of science fields. And one of the things that I mean, and Denise is right, she's talking about her own history, but primarily her own history as an astronaut. The book doesn't really go much beyond 93 when she retired from NASA, and 93 was also the first of the repair missions for the Hubble telescope, which enabled it to take those marvelous photographs that we've all seen. First 3 years that it was up there, there had been a mistake in the size, in the configuration of the mirror in that telescope. And so, as she points out, it was a mistake, but it was a very precise mistake. So the people on the ground were able to calculate what kind of sort of corrective lenses and mirrors they needed to produce in order to make that mirror function the way it was designed to function. And then the first repair mission in '93 went up there and put those parts in so that we started to get those really great photos and not those blurry ones from the first couple of years. I might say that if you haven't read the book and want to get a sense of it, near the bottom of this LibGuide, Kathy talks, there's that section, and this one right here, the presentation at Powell's Books that she did a year and a half ago, shortly after the book came out. That's basically about a 50-minute lecture that she gives that kind of walks through the process of the book. She's in Powell's Bookstore, which is a fabulous bookstore in Portland, Oregon. Actually, she's on their YouTube channel, but she's basically walking through the book. A lot of the illustrations that are in the book are part of her talk. So that's a really good way. If you're not a speed reader and you want to get the gist of the book, you can go to that presentation and pretty much get an understanding of what's going on in the book. The one right above that, What It's Like to Walk in Space and Dive 7 Miles Below the Sea, is a very brief 7-8 minutes, I think, discussion of the exciting aspects of both of those and the differences between being in outer space and being 7 miles below the surface of the ocean.
I have a question.
Yes.
In regards to that. So I didn't read the book, just to be transparent, but in the book, did she talk about like how her body was different while in space, like the physical conditions that might have distinguished the two? Because I think, like, you know, a lot of pressure in the ocean versus zero gravity in space. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and she answered a question about that. I think at the end of her presentation at Powell's Books. There's a Q&A session after her presentation. And she said, you know, basically in the space shuttle, you're weightless. And so that governs pretty much how you behave, what you do. In that AAAS David M. Rubenstein lecture, the first one of those Kathryn talks, that's about 22 minutes, and it's a great talk with good illustrations. She talks about how you learn very quickly in a weightless environment that you don't say, hand me this or give me that, you say, send me that, because a little touch on the back of a device or a piece of food or a water bottle or something will send it floating across the room to whoever's asking for it. She said, there's not an astronaut alive who didn't get home and try throwing a TV remote or something like that and having it drop right at their feet, because they're accustomed to just a light touch to get it to the next person. In the diving submarine, you're basically at normal pressure. So she's wearing normal clothes. You know, she's weighs whatever she weighs on the surface, basically. But the difference is outside. In the bottom of the ocean, you can't see more than a few feet, even if you've got a good light system. It's just totally dark. In space, there's light sources. You're seeing things, you know, you get a sunrise or a sunset every 45 minutes when you're in orbit, that she does mention in the book. And the difference, though, is outside. There's virtually no pressure outside of a space capsule. Outside of the submarine at the bottom of the ocean, it's 11,000 times what it is at the surface of the Earth. And the way she describes that is you've got a hippopotamus standing on one spiked heel on every square inch of the outside of this submarine. That's how much pressure there is on it, which is a nice vivid image if you can imagine a whole lot of hippos in spike heels dancing on the outside of a sub. But that's kind of, those are sort of the contrasts that she drew. She said in space, there's no life. The bottom of the ocean, even at 7 miles down, there's life. even at the very bottom, under that immense pressure, permanent darkness, there are living things everywhere you look if you've got a good light system. In space, nothing's alive except artificially. Yes, Denise.
There were parts that I thought were interesting where she talked about in their prep, and it was in different places. So it was in Houston, also in Sunnyvale, and possibly also in the diving chamber, where she at one point she had someone else's suit on and it didn't fit. And she talked about the pressure and the heaviness and the discomfort, but she had to just buck up and do it. I mean, I would never do that. I would think, my gosh, get me a suit that fits. I mean, this is hard enough already. So, I mean, she's really pretty tough. You know, if you've ever seen All the Right Stuff, you know, the tough guys, I mean, she's a tough female.
Yeah, I mean, most of the astronauts these days are not former test pilots, which the early ones all were.
Right.
But they're scientists, you know, they're oceanographers like her, they're physiologists, they're chemists, they're engineers of various kinds. They all get, to a certain extent, some flight training. But and it's very interesting that you bring that up, because one of the questions that I wanted to ask was how she handles being among the first astronauts who are female. You know, we've had astronauts since what, 1960? When we first started training test pilots to go into orbit. In 1978, she's just finished her graduate school in oceanography. And she says in the book, this is the first job interview I ever had, was with NASA. And for several of us, it's the first job we ever had, was being an astronaut, which is pretty astounding when you think of Sally Ride, who was another one of the first 6 women. Again, for her, it was the first job she'd ever had. She'd just come out of graduate school in a different program. And there's some pretty interesting things about being the first women. And one of the things that she says elsewhere, I read something that NASA had the wisdom to bring in a critical mass rather than bring in one woman as a pioneer. There were 6 of them in that class of 35. So they were able to kind of form a cohort, to collaborate. They got together with a senior woman scientist in NASA, who was a physiologist that had come up through the ranks, that kind of helped prepare them for what to expect. There's a nice little story when they were first introduced to the press, all these 35 new astronauts. The press just descended on the 6 women, the 3 African-American men who were the first African-Americans in the Space Corps, and the first, I think there was an Asian-American male as well. So there was the 10, and they started to call themselves 10 interesting people and 25 standard white guys, just because of the way the press behaved. The press ignored all these white guys because they'd all talked to pilots and, you know, astronauts from before, but they wanted to know the experience of the women, the Black men, the Asian American guy. And during the interview process, it was kind of, they were moving up and down the halls from one room to another. ABC would be here and NPR would be there and CBS and, you know, whoever, Bloomberg down there. And they'd all play like musical rooms. So they'd be in a room being interviewed by one media representative. They'd go down the hall to another one. They all met in the women's restroom. All the press there were males. All the public relations people from NASA were males. So these 6 women would get together in the restroom on their way to the next interview and compare notes and everything so that they could try to keep their stories straight. Very interesting. But as she said, NASA was smart to not just bring in 1 or even 2 at a time, but to bring in 6, because it gave them a critical mass. They didn't have to bear the burden of being the first and only of their gender in the space program. There are other problems. This is not in the book, but I read a little piece that she did in Time magazine a couple of years before the book came out, where she's kind of talking in more detail about that, you know, all these guys in NASA were so worried about, you know, what do we do? What do we, you know, what about a dress code? And the senior scientist, Caroline Huntoon, she says, well, what's your dress code for men? They said, well, we don't have one. She said, well, that's your answer. What are we going to do if, what if one of these women we select is married? She says, you select her. Well, what if her husband doesn't want to come to Houston? Well, what do you do if one of the men's wives doesn't want to come to Houston? That's your answer. So this woman kind of paved the way and just said, you're making a big deal out of things that aren't big deals. Just let it go. And once they're in there, I mean, she's doing the same training as everybody else. All of these are. And it really doesn't come up much beyond the initial part of her history in the astronaut corps, because it was just such a big change for the old timers, for the people who had always been running the program, that they had to think about some things. Denise.
I was thinking it might be interesting just to query our group. What was your first job or your first job interview? Was it to be an astronaut? Certainly not for me. Anybody want to chime in there?
I'll just chime in. I started working at my friend's parents' paintball field when I was 14. So I didn't get an interview. I got to do it, but it was a really unique first job.
How about Kayla or Gabriel, Jeff? Anybody want to share?
One of my first jobs relates a little to this. I got to be an oceanographer, and it was a little like this because I was the only woman on the ship. And so sometimes I'd be standing aside so the captain could go past, and other times he'd be holding the door open for me. So it was kind of weird, but we got it all straightened out.
What ocean was that, Ellen?
Pacific Ocean.
Oh.
It's a big ocean. No, actually, I think that one was even better. I think that was in the Sea of Cortez and the Pacific Ocean.
Anybody else want to tell us what their first job was? Okay, sounds like nobody had an astronaut interview.
Yeah. And another thing that made it somewhat easier for Kathy Sullivan is that her training was in oceanography, and she was sort of accustomed to being maybe the only woman on a research ship, or one of very few on a ship when she was out doing research on the ocean. She was one of maybe the only one or one of very few in a field camp during her summers, during her research time. So she, as a woman in almost any scientific field, especially at that time, she was unusual, as were all of these astronaut women coming in. So she was in some ways prepared for that.
Okay, Kayla's sharing she worked as a turn down attendant. So that was probably in a fancy hotel or resort. And Gabriel's telling us an office assistant. I'm trying to think, I was a candy striper, which we didn't even get paid for. It was a 14-year-old volunteer job. You brought magazines to people who were in their hospital beds. And I think in those days, you could also bring them cigarettes.
I don't think I had a job interview until I was in my late 30s. There's so many things that just sort of happened, you know. If you show up, you can get hired. Another question that one of our crew wanted to ask is, early on in the book, and maybe some of you can address this without having read the book necessarily, her grandmother died when she was 12. She'd been very close to her grandmother, and following her grandmother's death, her mother went into basically a lifelong depression and pretty much disappeared from active family life. And you know, what effect that has on her life in particular, or on anyone's life who's been through that. How does that change the way you look at the future? How does that change the way you operate as a teenager? Anybody want to tackle that one?
And you know, we've got Jennifer here. Jennifer Shellhorn has just joined us. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Sorry,
Hi.
I was caught up in office hours, so.
Okay, we're just kind of, this is a very low-key discussion, so anything you want to chime in. Mark is our leader, and here's Jennifer, our geology teacher.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks.
So if you want to start, the first question I asked was just if people enjoyed the book, and why not? Not all of us have read it, which is all right. So I don't want to put you on the spot necessarily.
I actually did not have a chance to read it. I just found out about the book this week, and so it is on my reading list. But I am certainly interested in participating in conversation as you go through some questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were just talking a little bit about what it was like to be among the first women in the astronaut corps. And I was here too. Welcome.
Maybe you can ask both of these ladies what their first job interview was.
Yeah. Because Kathy Sullivan's first job interview in her life was to be an astronaut. She was just finishing her doctorate in oceanography, and the first job interview she had, it was her first job that she'd ever had.
I was an ice cream scooper. Yep, I scooped ice cream when I was 14.
Baskin and Robbins, or?
So I'm actually from Massachusetts. So there are a couple little mom and pop shops in my hometown that I scooped at. No big names, just essentially working under the table when I shouldn't have been. But yeah, those were my first jobs.
Hyla, can I put you on the spot? What was your first job interview?
Okay, I'll unmute, but now I feel bad because I haven't heard everything that went on before I got here. Well, I was in high school. I'm born and raised in San Luis Obispo. And if I took a job, my first job ever was working, it was called the Telegram Tribune, which is still the Tribune. And I did it because I could get out of class on Wednesday afternoons. So on Wednesday and Saturdays, we would get together and stuff the newspaper. So it was high school student jobs. That was my first job. My first interview was for the Colony Kitchen Restaurant, which is where Denny's is on Madonna Road right now. A lot of us from San Luis High School got hired to work there because the manager at the time was a San Luis Obispo High School graduate. And all he wanted to know mainly was what my dedication was. And at the time, my husband was overseas with the Vietnam War, and I was living in San Luis Obispo with my 2.5-year-old son, and I needed to work while he went to daycare. So the interview was short and sweet, and he was married to one of my friends that I'd gone to high school with. So it was kind of all in the family, so to speak. My name's Hyla, and I worked with a woman named Lola. And in those days, there was a couple of women that I worked with that were, that's what they did for a living. You know, I was just doing it as a side job. And I ended up working in restaurants for 20 years. But it was an easy interview because he was the husband of a friend of mine. And I ended up loving working in restaurants. Okay, now you know, but I don't know about any of the rest of you.
Well, I think it's safe to say that none of us has had interviews anything like what the interview for Astronaut is.
Yeah.
Another question. I mean, it's hard to address the question about her grandmother's death and her mother's depression without having some background in the book, but one of the things that she says is that she sort of stepped up to become kind of the housekeeper in the family. She's 12 years old, and that she figures that experience taught her, it forced her to develop some inner strength and some independence, which I think probably are both characteristics of that would lead to success in almost any field, really. And I think it's interesting also that her early attraction to things scientific was to maps. She was in love with maps as a child. She didn't know much about jobs that involved travel and things. She'd heard about a foreign service officer. And in high school, she'd studied French and German. She went to, Santa Cruz, mainly because they had a good Russian program, Russian language program. She wanted to study Russian. She wanted to get fluent in Russian, German, French, all these languages, so she could travel the world as a foreign service officer. Those people at Santa Cruz made her take science courses as part of her general requirements. She fell in love with oceanography and geology courses, changed her major at the end of her freshman year, and 15 years later, she's an astronaut. So,
Mark, if you want, I can read that. I've got that page marked.
Oh, good, yeah. Yeah, please.
Helpful. Okay, this is page 13. In their first chapter, she calls herself a Sputnik baby. As I walked into the first meeting with my academic advisor, professor of French literature, so-and-so, the most pressing questions on my mind were how quickly I could start Russian classes, which courses would prepare me best for a career in the foreign service, still the only specific job I knew about, and whether there was some way I could take more than the 3 classes per term that were then standard at UC Santa Cruz. I'd spent hours poring over the course catalog in the summer, and I knew I couldn't possibly fit everything I wanted to take into 4 years at the measly rate of 3 classes per term. The advisor smiled kindly before informing me that there was a much more immediate issue to decide. So they're prereqs. That must sound a little bit familiar. Which 3 science classes I would need to fulfill my freshman year general ed requirement. Having helped many a young language major clear this hurdle, he suggested 3 that he knew to be interesting, well taught, and not too hard. I argued fiercely against what I considered a needless delay on my path to Russian fluency and my life dream of exploration and adventure. Luckily for me, I failed to win the argument. The mandatory science courses foisted on me that day introduced me to earth sciences, geology, and oceanography specific, and to young faculty scientists who were living exactly the kind of exquisite and adventurous life I had dreamt about for so many years. I had changed majors at the end of that first year and set out to become an oceanographer.
So the lesson for young people, and another thing that we can have fun talking about based on this book or other is, how would you advise young women who are interested in, or who might be interested in STEM fields as a career? What can you get from this book that might help encourage them? And I think the part that Denise just read is an encouragement to remain open and be flexible. A lot of us started college with very clear ideas of what we wanted to do, where we wanted to be 5 years, 20 years, 50 years from now. I suspect that many of us who've been out there for long enough to have some history of this aren't quite where we imagined we might be. One of the advantages of college, one of the advantages of the general university requirements is to expose us to things that, I had no idea what anthropology was when I finished high school. I'm sure I'd seen the word, but I had no idea. You know, we didn't teach things like that in my little farm town high school. There were a lot of other things we didn't teach, and a few of which I got exposed to in college and didn't follow, but at least I knew what they were. And I could, you know, congratulate friends who'd gone into those fields and done well. But, you know, here's somebody that, oh, I want to travel, learn languages. She did travel, 200 miles up, 7 miles down. And as her mother said, when she was finishing her graduate program in oceanography, and she was home visiting her family in California. And she said, well, I'm waiting on an interview with NASA. And if that doesn't work out, then I will be an oceanographer. So I'm either going to be 200 miles up or 7 miles down. And her mother looked at her and she said, isn't there anything interesting on the surface? Yeah. Her mother called her the next day to apologize for being kind of mean-spirited about it, but I thought that was a very interesting question for a woman who hasn't really been a part of her life, who was depressed the whole time she was growing up, to just ask I think, a pretty germane question. What is it about the surface? But as she discovered, you know, she learned an awful lot about the surface of the planet as well as the depths and the heights as an astronaut. And she's very clear at the end that her interest in being 200 miles up was looking back, even though she spent a lot of her career making that Hubble telescope usable and repairable, which is kind of the technological core of the book. Her focus when she was up there was always not what's out there beyond the stars, but what can I learn about the Earth from being up here? So different perspective, you know. I mean, she's working on the greatest gift to astronomy since telescopes, but her focus always personally is what can this experience tell me about what's going on down on Earth?
It might be fun to query Ellen and Jennifer without putting them on the spot, but I think they're both science majors, where they started and how their interests, you know, drifted here and there to today.
Ellen, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. Let's see. I was at UC Santa Cruz as a chem major, and I got to take this fabulous class in marine chemistry, and it was like the first applied chemistry class. And it was so fun. And it's like after all this years and years and years of theory, something applied. And so then I started doing oceanography on grant work and learned to do a mean titration at sea and set up experiments to do at sea. And I really had a lot of fun with that and thought about getting a PhD, but that didn't work out and I needed real life money. So I got a job doing water quality chemistry for the county, which was kind of boring in comparison, but we still got to design studies and stuff. So that was good. And then what else happened? Just generally, I think it's encouraging for students and young people just to hang out with other scientists. Like I remember going backpacking with one of my biologist friends with two astronomer guys, and one of them eventually married Sally Ride. No, yeah. And so just hanging out with those people and going to the geology Friday afternoon talks where they serve beer and popcorn, just such a nice group. So I would just encourage young people just to hang out and go to free lectures and see what your friends are studying. It's like at Cuesta, I see all the kids in the study room when we're on campus in the study rooms, just talking and sharing and comparing goals and adjusting their trajectories and going, God, math is so hard. We hate math. We hate math. What can we do with no more math? And then they buck up and go on, make it on another semester. And I just think that the networking and just the power of your peers is so powerful and just leads you in directions you would never imagine. It's like doors open that you will never know existed. So that's my little spiel. Then I became a librarian and have lots of fun with our science collection.
Well, Ellen, I can't say that I have too different of a journey. I went to college. I was a very good student in high school, and I felt this pressure because being back east, community college was not, it wasn't really accepted so much as a good stage of life, a good intermediary. It was, if you went to community college, you were not good enough to get into a 4-year. And so I am somebody who would have really benefited from going to community college because I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I was going through the motions and I was changing my major, I feel like every semester. And finally, I had to take a year of lab science because I went to a liberal arts school. And I promise you, I did not even know what geology was. I sat in my first day of class. I had no idea what it was. No idea. I didn't grow up in a science house. We didn't talk about science. You know, I was too busy playing outside as a kid in our swimming pool. We didn't go places and look at stuff. It just wasn't part of my culture growing up. And so I didn't realize how much of a big wide world there was out there. And the very first day of class, when I learned how old Earth was, and the inevitable predicted fate of the future of our solar system when the sun's supernovas, blew my mind. And I knew that day that I needed to become a geology major, because if I didn't, I always would have wondered what if, and I couldn't deal with what if. I needed to keep learning more about it because it challenged everything I had ever thought. And I was fortunate to have a very close group of geology majors that were there, and they welcomed me immediately. And you're right, experiences with my peers, but also having experiences with faculty, spending time with them, getting to know what research they did. I was out doing research by the end of my first semester, and that's when I fell in love with mud. So I am actually a paleoclimatologist, and my focus is on lake mud. And so yes, mud. Who knew mud had so many great things to say? And so I was out on boats and taking sediment cores, I mean, literally like straws to muck at the bottom of the ocean, the bottom of lakes, and extruding it in the waves. And it was just so much fun. And, you know, I continued that. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I hadn't been, I want to work as a geologist in the field. My wife, however, is a geologist in the field. Once she found geology, she knew she wanted to be actively out there doing this, and she has the personality for it. I do not. But when I was 8 years old, I found out I had this amazing teacher, this amazing experience, and I had always wanted to be a teacher. And for so much of my life, everybody said, "Oh, don't be a teacher. Don't be a teacher. You could do so many great things, like you could go to space." And I just was like, okay. And then when I was in college, I realized they are all teachers. That you can teach at a higher level. And it was this recognition that you can be a teacher just outside of kindergarten, outside of high school. And it was honestly awakening, and it made science approachable. It made me realize, oh, I want to teach other people, and just have those aha moments when you realize how cool this planet is. But you know, I didn't have a lot of science background, and it was not something that was encouraged in my family, not because they didn't believe it, but it just wasn't part of our culture. And so that's what I love about the community college experience, is you get exposed to things and you're challenging what you know and what you believe. And so I think for our students, it's amazing to hear stories like this where you're so set in a path, or maybe you don't have a path, and just take that class. You might become a ceramicist, or you might become a welder. You know, you could become all sorts of things, but you don't know until you go there. And so I think that it's really inspirational that she knew what she wanted to do, and it was just finding a different avenue for it. So I'm excited to read about her journey. But that's a little bit about me, and I'm really good at talking, so I'll stop now.
Mark, do we want to ask if anybody else wants to share their, as a student right now? Gabriel, Jeffrey, Kayla, Stephanie, how do you feel? You're in a geology class, or you're in a library tech class, or you're in a biology class. Do you feel inspired? Are you, maybe it's a general ed rec that you're taking, or prereq for something? Any thoughts? And that's kind of a hard question, but
I will answer.
Especially with your instructor sitting in the same room.
Yeah. Well,
should I leave?
No.
Can I add something?
Sure.
So I, just because of hearing all of that, so I wasn't inspired by anything when I was going through school as a young child. There's nothing that inspired me, but I got married right out of high school. So I didn't come back to college until 10 years later, almost 10 years. My son was 9 years old. And I came to Cuesta because Cuesta was there, and I was from San Luis, and we had gone through the Air Force, and we came back to San Luis Obispo because that's where we're from. And I started to take ceramics and tennis and fun things. Then I took psychology, and it kind of sparked something in me. And I ended up loving it. And that led to child development, which made me feel, I already had been a parent for a number of years, and that really started to click. And that's what started for me. But in those days that I graduated from Cuesta College, we could graduate with math or science. We didn't have math and science. And I hated math in high school. So I got all the math I needed and started taking science classes at Cuesta College, starting with life science with Gary Bauer, and totally got hooked. Then, I loved it. Then I took geology, and we went on the geology field trip, then chemistry, then the nutrition class that I had to have to graduate in early childhood education. And that had a lot of chemistry in it. And I ended up loving how I could feel the connections with all the science. And I was very excited that I didn't have to do more math, but I did a lot of science at Cuesta College. And as it turns out, in going through ECE, one thing that has really hit me, I graduated in 1981. So neuroscience has been my biggest interest. If I was going to go on, but I'm old, I'm not going to do any more school, but I definitely have studied lots about neuroscience because of early brain development. And I love teaching about infant toddler development in early childhood. So science just inspired me as an older person. Anyway, but it started at Cuesta College. And then I came back to Cuesta, taught early childhood, really taught a lot about early brain development when I was teaching my classes. So anyway, Cuesta students that are there, I hope you might have another response, but I got to say Cuesta did inspire that in me, and through the science classes at Cuesta. And then I went on, I got all my undergraduate work done at Cuesta, and then went on and got my BA and master's. So anyway, I think science is very exciting. And I love working with children birth to age 5 because they are total scientists when we let them do it. And they discover so much. And all we have to do is give them the opportunity to have a lot of time to do it and be there to talk with them about it and add things that inspire. So, you could spend a whole day on snails, for instance, when you're a preschool kid. So anyway, that was the fun of it for me. And hearing her story, it's like, following a little bit of a dream, even though my dream started late, but it was wonderful, has been wonderful. I'm still doing it. I can't give it up. I'm not doing it all through Cuesta, but I'm doing a lot of training on the side because I know so much.
Inspired by science. I just want to share one thing from this book. Mercedes, if you could scroll down just a little bit so we can see the full cover over there. The photograph, and this talking about things that blew your mind, finding out how old the Earth was, Jennifer, this blew my mind. The photograph on top is Kathryn Sullivan looking out of the shuttle back at Earth. The photograph that is behind the print on the bottom half is a picture that Hubble took of a part of space that was empty. Astronomers had no idea if there was anything there at all until they aimed Hubble at that part of space. And there are all those points of light there, a lot of stars, right? There are 2 stars in that whole photograph. Every other light source is a galaxy. And that's in a part of space that didn't have anything as far as we knew until 1993.
Makes you feel awfully small, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, that just took my breath away when I learned that. And that's the kind of thing that the Hubble is doing. There are more than 18,000 scientific papers that have been published since 1990 using data from this one telescope. A lot of people are benefiting, including, and not to mention all of us who just like the artistic view of some of these supernovas and these galaxies and all those wonderful photographs that we get from Hubble. And we do have a link to the Hubble site there that you can get the whole history of the telescope and more images than you know what to do with for your entertainment or for your learning.
Do you want to have Mercedes click on one of those?
Pardon me?
On one of the Hubble links?
Yeah.
They're up at the top, are they?
Upper right, yeah.
Oh, sorry, our pictures are in my way. One of these?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's just the Hubble site that NASA operates, and it has information on the history of the project. It's got news, what's going on lately. And then there's images and videos.
Would you like me to click on the images?
Yeah, and the book has paired images of an image of one part of space that was taken with the telescope when it was first launched, before they fixed the mirror, and then the same part of space when they fixed the mirror, and considerable difference. It's like one of my photographs on an old phone versus a professional photographer's photographs of the same subject. So there's just lots of things, and this gets into the media every time they have something interesting. It shows up in newspapers, or you'll see it on television, or see it on the internet or something.
Is this based off the same photo from the book cover, or is this a different one?
Different one.
This is different too.
I can't remember the specific location of the one on the book cover, but I read that and it just blew me away that those aren't even stars. Those are all galaxies.
Those are all galaxies. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually saw that photo on the book cover when I was in high school, and it made me want to be an astrophysicist, but I couldn't get through the physics. That was my, nope, not going down this route, sadly.
Well, as her history demonstrates, and as some of the histories of all of these women astronauts that there's another link to on that LibGuide show, is there are a lot of different paths to get into space. There are a lot of different pathways to get to almost any place, whether it's mud or galaxies far, far away. It's just being open and following where your loves are, where your interests are. But yeah, those I mean, it's just a phenomenal variety of backgrounds and interests and technical skills and knowledge that, you know, we're way past the days of just test pilots going up there in rockets and coming back down. We're scientists and explorers going up there to do work that's harder to do on the planet's surface.
I'm going to add.
Go ahead.
I just think that the future of space travel is huge, and there's going to be so much going on. I did a lot of research, Googling a lot of women astronauts and finding out their histories and how they got to where they're at and why they're there and what they're doing. But everything will be, there will be a lot more. One question you didn't ask was who of us might want to go into space. But at any rate, I can see a lot more happening with the future of what's going to happen in space. And yeah, however we inspire it, or it was wonderful reading about all these women and where their inspirations came from. And it, you know, even if all they're doing is doing something mechanical on a spaceship that's already out there somewhere, but there's going to be a lot of more opportunities in the future.
Yeah, and if you're, for those of you who are at all technologically inclined, the bulk of the book, which I find very fascinating, even though I don't understand some of the terminology. I mean, you know, you can't write a book about NASA without lots of acronyms and initials and technical language. It's not possible, so that's fine. I forgive you, Kathy. But the detail that goes into inventing a tool for use in outer space. One of the advantages that she had was her experience as an oceanographer. She was comfortable in scuba gear. She was comfortable underwater. She'd spent a lot of time doing that. So she was able to fairly easily move into being one of the people who went into the big swimming pools, basically, with mock-ups of the Hubble in the pool so that they could test and develop not only tools, but ways of anchoring themselves to the, you know, you don't realize when you're earthbound that twisting a wrench in one direction might turn the bolt in that direction, but it also might turn the whole thing to which the bolt is attached in another direction because there's no gravity holding it down. Or it might turn the astronaut in the opposite direction. And so a lot of their work in the tank was to develop handholds, and they go into a lot of detail on a foot anchor that enabled them to pivot a little bit, but still kept them from just flying off into space when they hit something with a hammer. And that whole thing is fascinating as well. And the huge number of people with varying expertises who all come together to work on these things. It was in some ways a benefit to the Hubble program, the tragedy of the Challenger disaster, which put the whole shuttle program back about 3-4 years, because the initial thinking on the Hubble Space Telescope was they'd go up and get it every few years and bring it back to Earth and do repairs on it and upgrades. Had they launched that thing in the 80s, it probably still wouldn't be fixed because they discovered during this long delay, and they had time, Sullivan and her team and engineers at Lockheed and other places to really make the thing repairable in space, which it wasn't and wouldn't have been had they launched 3 or 4 or 5 years earlier. It was 1990, 4 years after the Challenger disaster, that they finally got this thing into space. And her team spent a good portion of that time making it more repairable, fighting with the people who developed it and built it to change it so that it was repairable in space. So,
Mark, I was going to share just as a, you know, what if on the other side, career choices or career inspirations. I was not like Mercedes or Jennifer or even Hyla or Ellen in terms of inspired by science. I was fast-tracked in high school in fast-track math track. And I did pretty well until I got to trigonometry, and I couldn't grasp that. So I did drop out of trig. And instead I took a journalism class, which I really liked. And then I also ended up working part-time in the high school library. Then in college, I didn't know what, and I'm probably more typical than folks that some of the rest of you, and certainly Kathryn Sullivan, who's so self-directed, so aware, from age 10 on, she knows what she wants to be and very disciplined. I think I signed up as an English major, and no, I signed up as a psychology major at UCSB. I never took a psychology class. I ended up as a Russian studies and literature major, which is not something I really used extensively, except in a general manner. I also remember taking an astronomy class as a freshman. I did not do that well. I skipped the labs. I ended up with a pass. I had taken it pass fail, and I actually don't know quite how I did that. The professor was generous or goofed in adding up my scores. So anyway, long story short, I did come to be a librarian, which is a generalist in many ways. And I have certainly used Russian literature in helping people find, different versions of Dostoevsky or Chekhov, but I'll be the counterpoint. I wasn't inspired by science. I didn't, really grasp a lot of the science stuff and went in some other directions, but it took me a while to get to that. So maybe some of our students that are here will take a little comfort in that.
I got my library degree when I was 39, so I was kind of a late bloomer as well. And I avoided science in college. I took 2 semesters of physics at 8 a.m. 4 days a week my freshman year in college to satisfy my science requirement. And one of my regrets is that I didn't take any other science courses. Years later in graduate school, I started hanging out with archaeologists and paleopollen specialists and a guy who was a high school physics and chemistry teacher in Fiji for the first half of his career. And I just started, these people shared their excitement about science, and I started getting really interested in a lot of fields. And one of the advantages of librarians, as you mentioned, is you're a generalist and you get permission, professional permission to get really excited about just about any subject that you're helping somebody work on, which I love, because I can get equally excited about this or about a piece of music. Math, not so much maybe. But you're not done learning just when you finish college, by any means. And paths can change, careers can change, jobs will disappear, new ones will show up that you had no idea existed. I mean, she didn't know about astronauts when she was a kid. She grew up, she's my age basically. And we grew up with Alan Shepard and John Glenn and Yuri Gagarin and all those very early people, but I can't tell you who any astronauts were between 1965, probably 69, and then Kathryn Sullivan and Sally Ride and their troop. But this is, she does a good job of giving you all the technical details you could want on how challenging it is to go about making these kinds of things work. If you're ever in DC, go to the Space Museum and look at one of those early Mercury capsules that are just, it's phenomenal that anybody survived those. They're basically putting you the computing power that's 1/10 of what's in your iPod, and you're setting this little conical shaped piece of metal on top of a bomb and throwing it up into space. I couldn't do that. Claustrophobia prevents me from being an oceanographer or an astronaut, among other things.
I was just going to add to a little bit, just for encouragement for anybody who might be going through this or will some point go through this, because of course, now that I've gone through a lot of college and I have my master's in library science, like I look back and there were many times, well, first in undergrad where I changed my major like 16 different times. I went in as a bio and I eventually ended up graduating with a bio degree. But then the first 2 years after I graduated, I ended up working in food service. So I felt like a complete failure in my eyes that I didn't go onto a biology related job, but it was just timing, and it was like a lot of, I guess, self-exploration, but I did end up finding my passion in libraries, and I actually went to Cuesta for my library tech degree and eventually to my master's. But I guess it's all just to say, like, when I felt like my undergrad was kind of a waste of time, like, why did I even go? But now I'm like incredibly grateful that even though for a couple of years after I had gone, that I'm a completely different person in a good way for having gone. And hopefully that just gives, some folks encouragement that if you're in a rut, they might take time, but it will get better, and to be patient with yourself. So.
Prize time.
Thanks for that, Mercedes. I think that was really helpful.
Yes.
So shall we do a prize break?
Let's do a prize break.
Okay. I've got
Let's
three.
Give somebody a pie.
I've got 3 prizes to give away. These 3 are actual gift certificates. So I think, as I said early on, they will be sent to you in the mail. They are for local San Luis Obispo County merchants. So if you are not a local San Luis person, instead I'll substitute a coffee gift certificate to Starbucks, which we can mail to you, email to you. Okay, so I've got the names on the wheel. Mark and I are not eligible to win. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And Ellen, I don't know, should we put you on as a possible or not? Ellen might be in another chat room right now. Okay, we'll skip her for this one. All right, so I have this little spinning device that you can see, and I'm gonna spin it. Let's see what happens. Okay, I have Al, who is not here right now. So we're going to hold on and see what happens, and see. Al started with us and then he came back and then he left, but he might come back. Okay, so don't worry, we've got some more. You guys still with me here? Can you hear the spinning?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, that adds the excitement, I know. Oh, we've got Jennifer has won a prize. All right.
I would like to donate my prize to anyone. I believe that it should go towards the students that are here. So if there is any student that is here that does not win a prize, I will put you in to get my prize.
All right. Well, hey, that's very nice. Okay, so I'm going to take Jennifer off our board. So we're going to do a couple more because we don't know about Al. Okay, ready? Very scientific, you can see.
Well, we could calculate the probability if you wanted to make it scientific.
Well,
I personally am not a fan, but I will do it.
That's all right. We'll go with our old-fashioned way. Okay, I have Jeffrey as our next winner.
Woo!
Jeffrey, where do you live? Are you in SLO or are you someplace else?
I'm in Santa Barbara.
In Santa Barbara. Okay. Well, hey, these are the prizes that I have that are the gift certificates. Woodstock's Pizza. Is there one in Santa Barbara?
I don't think so.
How about Blaze Pizza? There might be one there.
I'm not sure. I'm from SLO, but I moved here a few months ago, and so I'm still learning.
Okay, and then the other one is Lynn's Fruit Pies up in Cambria.
Oh, let's do that. That sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And then if you can do this, you can get your family a gift or something. And if you can, in the chat, or let's see, in the chat privately, you can give me your mailing address. Do you know how to do a private chat?
I think so. Let's see here. Oh yeah, I see it.
Or I can also why don't I just give you my email address and you can just email me your mailing address at your leisure. Okay.
Okay, so whatever works.
Okay, so there is my email address. So just send me your contact information and we'll send you the Lynn's pie.
Thank you so much.
In the mail, but yeah, cool. Okay, so Jeffrey is our winner. I'm going to take him off our board. Okay, we're still going here. Hang on, you guys still with me? I know this is very exciting and low tech. Okay, we got a blank space. Okay, Gabriel, you are our next winner. So what is your preference, Gabriel? I think you're out of town, right? Paso, okay. Would you like Woodstock's pizza or Blaze pizza?
I think maybe Woodstock's.
Okay. And if I think you've got my email address, just email me your mailing address so we can mail you that actual coupon, okay?
Okay,
great. You. Good job. Okay, so we've got, I'm gonna do one more. And Jennifer is giving her prize away, but we have one more that we can do. Let's see, let's take Gabriel off our board. All right, so we really just have 3 more people on our Wheel of Fortune here. See what happens. Okay, blank space, try it again. All right, it looks like Stephanie has won this time. Yeah. All right, Stephanie, way to go. And how about you? Are you in SLO? Are you elsewhere?
I'm in 5 cities and that's where I live.
Are you okay with a Blaze pizza coupon?
I would prefer a coffee coupon.
Coffee, okay. And same thing, if you want to, let me put my, I'm gonna put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And just send me your email address, because that way you need your coffee to get through. I will send you the gift certificate for the Starbucks.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, very good. So let's see. Stephanie, Kayla. So Kayla is our remaining student that did not win a prize. So Jennifer, shall we have her take yours?
I think that is a fantastic idea.
Okay. And Kayla, whereabouts do you live? Are you local or in SLO County?
I
you are local?
Yeah.
Cities? Would you like a Blaze pizza coupon?
Yes, sure.
Okay. And then the same thing, if you can send to my email address, which I put in the chat, just send me your mailing address and we'll get the Blaze coupon off to you in a couple days.
Okay.
All righty. Okay. All right. I'm done with our Wheel of Fortune. Thanks for everybody for your patience with our low tech method, and we'll go back to Mark.
Okay. I've asked the questions that I wanted to ask, and I've answered some of them, and you've helped with some of the others. But is there anything that you want to ask or comment about in terms of this book, in terms of NASA, in terms of the Hubble Space Telescope, women in science?
I have a question.
Yes.
You had mentioned that she was interested about, while she was up in space, what did she learn about the Earth while she was there in space?
You know what? I've got a 2-part answer. One is a lot, and 2 is I would recommend in the LibGuide here under Kathryn Sullivan Talks, The first one, the lecture, when she was inaugurated a few years back into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, she was asked to give a talk the day after the big inauguration ceremonies and everything. And she did, it's like 22 minutes. And she starts out by saying, essentially, I think it says there, I'm going to talk about the golly gee, it's fun stuff. She says, everybody who's ever been in space looks down over some landmass and they say, oh my God, it looks just like the map. Except that in her childhood, Italy was pink, and Italy is not pink from space, but otherwise. So she has a lot of great photos and videos of the golly gee cool stuff. You know, what the Earth looks like, what the aurora looks like from space, what the Earth looks like at night, a city, a fleet of boats on the sea outside the city, all those great things. And then the last part of it, which is, I think, an answer to your question, Stephanie, is what does an Earth scientist learn from, and she's saying, we are in the space age, you know, whether we acknowledge it or not. All of these things that we learn from satellites, and she's got illustrations of orbits of all these satellites compiling information on soil moisture, vapor content in the atmosphere, wind motions, sea motions, the currents in the ocean, all these things that not only enable us to predict weather more accurately than we've ever been able to. I mean, people used to get killed by hurricanes because they didn't see them coming. Now they get killed by hurricanes because they're too stupid to move and get out when they see them coming. But also things like crop forecasts, you know, commodity prices, all these things are dependent on things like information that we didn't have any way of knowing until we had these satellites collecting it, combined with the computing power that we've developed to know how to use that data. So a lot of it is that kind of thing. And it's a really good illustration with some wonderful visuals of all these different things that we learn from space that enable us to live more effectively on Earth.
Thank you.
So that's a shorthand way of telling you what's in there, but I think it's worth watching that whole talk. And I recommend that, as I said in the note there, I recommend that highly. It's a good encapsulation of the cool stuff from being in space and how it benefits those of us, as her mother would say, on the surface.
Mark, did you see Jennifer's question? Where would you want to look on your first look back at Earth from space?
I can't say grammar is my strongest suit.
Any thoughts on that for the group?
Stephanie, where would you want to look?
Okay, so we're not looking through a telescope, but we're just looking out of our spacecraft.
Yeah.
I would be so excited that I could actually say, I saw the blue marble with my own eyes from space. I just would want to see the Earth as the blue marble, quote unquote, you know, and actually see that picture that famous picture that we're all very familiar with, because it's such a beautiful picture. And yeah, that's what I'd want to see. I'd want that experience.
Cool.
And feel the gratitude for how, you know, it was created, and, you know, being out there and realizing, you know, the accretion and everything that we learned about in astronomy, and actually just being in the midst of an expanding universe. That would be totally awesome, to be that little speck. I
have to agree with Stephanie. I feel like it'd be very disorienting to look out into like the black of the universe, or I guess I don't know what you might see. I'm sure you'll see something, but I don't know, maybe for people who are afraid of heights, seeing the Earth from far above might be a little scarier. I don't know.
And you said, I don't want to mispronounce it, Halia? Is that?
Hyla.
Hyla, sorry, Hyla, you said the Northern Lights. Yeah, I think that would be amazing from space.
That would make me want to go to space. Both those things that you just said. Looking back at the Earth that we've just seen pictures of, And I remember having that feeling because when the moon launch happened and my whole family was all gathered so we could watch the moon launch, the first step on the moon, and seeing the pictures that they sent back and just being in awe of, this is what our world looks like. Well, anyway.
Jeffrey, you said Mount Everest. I prematurely hit enter, but I was going to say the same thing. I would love to see either mountain range like the Himalayas, or I just want to see the Pacific Ocean and just go, oh my goodness, that covers like a huge portion of our planet. I mean, just the vastness of the Pacific Ocean, I think would be really humbling. Yeah, those would be the two things that I would want to see.
I think it would be cool to see the round planet or the, you know, the structure of the planet, not as we see it on a map or a website, but to actually see that that structure, and again to see all the water bodies, the bodies of water, I think would be really interesting.
Jeffrey, were you going to follow up on that?
I was just going to say, I do a lot of backpacking, and then that was really relatable to the scaling we've done in labs. And so I think that by seeing Everest, you know, knowing it's like 5 to 6 miles high, you'd be sort of able to get a range of, you know, how far out in space you are and how small it is looking at it.
Yeah, it's, you know, just under 9 kilometers, 29,000 feet. Crazy, very humbling. Yeah, I love that you were able to apply that. Gabriel, oh yeah, to see hurricanes, to see the eye of the storm. Is that where you're thinking, or like the cloud cover?
It'd be fun to see like the Mississippi River Delta all coming down, and then the sediment plume as it goes out, and the land masses, just kind of the water, the alluvial plume kind of happening under the water.
Yeah, that'd be really cool too. I mean, because as a geologist or a student of geology, you hear these words and then I say, now picture this in your brain, right? Or I could show you pictures, but you might not be able to see it, but to see it from space and aerial imagery like that, I think really puts some depth to and context to what you're supposed to be looking at. Yeah, that'd be really cool. I think one of the things that stuck with me is most of the major rivers on our planet are failed rift zones. And so when you look at major rivers, you think about it, that was once pulling apart, spreading this continent apart, and then it failed. And now we have a river, and it's such a remarkable feature. They're like the veins of our planet. So I think that'd be really cool.
I have a geology question, Jennifer. Okay, so you know how there are like storms under the ocean sometimes in the water? Aren't there like storms like in the water column, sort of?
Oh, so well, are you relating it to say like circulation and the stratification?
No, not like the regular circulation stratification, but I learned a little bit how sometimes in the ocean they have storms like we have storms in the air. And I was wondering if you could ever see those from space.
You know, I can't say that I know very much about it, but what my guess would be is because of the depth of the ocean, and I don't know if you could see too much of the mechanics or the depth. But I wonder if alternative imagery like LiDAR, you know, something along that scope of different style imagery might be able to reveal something more than the high resolution photographs of that.
Well, there's a good research topic for a quiet Friday afternoon.
You know, those are the things my wife and I do. My wife is also a geologist, so we do this. We go on road trips and we look at a rock and go, I wonder how that formed. And then we'll spend an entire road trip talking about it. Or we play this game called GeoGuessr. and you get dropped anywhere in the world and you have to figure out where you are. And we use the geology. We look at the rock type and if it is plains, if it looks like it are mountains, and we nerd out on that all the time. So I wouldn't put it past, this could be a hot Friday night topic.
Yeah. So that game you play, is that a formal game or is that a game that you play?
It is a formal game.
Oh, what is it called?
I will drop the link in the chat. And I think it's fascinating for geography students, but just for anyone who is has an interest in geography and understanding what different places in the world are. So it's based off of Google Earth. It's not a Google product, but you know, when you look on Google Maps or on Google Earth and you can go to Street View, this is the Street View version, and you get dropped someplace that the Google Earth car has gone. And sometimes you could be on a hiking trail. So people will carry them sometimes, and you have to find where you are down to, I mean, very precise, and you get awarded points.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and there are a couple different ways that you can do it. They've just updated it. I have a paid account, but you get one free play a day. But yeah, it's really fun.
I just went to the website. It does look fun.
We are nearing the end of our advertised time. And if you all want to stick around and continue to nerd out, this conversation is getting interesting. Feel free to do that. I just want to thank you for coming. Thank you for participating. Congratulations to those of you who won prizes. Yay. And we can't leave without at least a brief preview of coming attractions. So I will let, do we have, Mercedes, do we have the book of the year coming up? Another.
Yeah, I can share it. I will have to leave at 3 or 30 after though, just FYI. So
yeah.
but I can pull it up right now.
Okay, we'll get a quick look at that. I'll let Denise say a few things about that because she's been living this book of the year for 1.5 years now.
Cuesta typically has a book of the year every year. We had to cancel, and these are usually in-person events where we bring a famous author to campus. Last year we had Meredith May of the Honey Bus coming, and that does have science overtones in it as well. And we had to cancel last year. Now we have her coming virtually. It's free to attend. So what I would suggest is go to the tiny URL that is right in the middle of the page, the https://bit.ly. Yeah, that guy. Maybe just hit that, Mercedes. And then I'll take you to our Eventbrite site. You do need to sign up, even though it's free, just because we have to count numbers of heads that will be let into our Zoom room. But she's a beekeeper and a journalist. And she talks a little bit about her early life struggles and then how she kind of found herself through communing with nature, learning all about bees and their habits, raising them, and being in an outdoor natural environment. So it's a little bit lighter science than maybe this one, but we would love to have you come. And I'll send you the link when I send you the recording to this as well. Okay.
Okay. Again, thank you. I enjoyed the book. I enjoyed talking with you, listening to you about your adventures in science and other things. I do encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to read the book, take a look at it. If you're really pressed for time, do that Powell's book presentation, which walks you through it. Definitely do the AAAS lecture, which is 22 minutes and great visuals, and finishes answering your question, Stephanie, about what we learned from space, what an Earth scientist and the rest of us learned from having been in space and still being there. Thanks, Mercedes. See you later.
Thank you. And thank you to all my students that came today. It was great to see you, and I hope that you gained something from the experience.
And thanks, Jennifer, for coming and for bringing your students along. That was really great.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wish I had more time to be prepared, and I should have been following along, but
Well, sometimes ad lib is just as good. Doesn't have to be, you know, that's why we advertise this as a kind of fun and easy book club. It's not like an English class. No English instructors to be offended, but it's a little more just experiential.
No test up front to see if you've read it or not before you can enter the essay questions.
No, but that would be good for some students though, right? No, I enjoy the relaxed atmosphere, and it's really nice to meet others, especially in this virtual world right now. So
I think I met you when you were new and you came to a flex activity in that building. I don't know how that was 2-3 years ago. It seems like a lifetime ago, but
that was August 2019. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, that's not that long ago. It's just our hazy
but
memories.
It sure has felt that long for me.
Yes, definitely. Okay, I'm going to jump over and relieve Dell, who's in another meeting. So I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have
Denise.
a good afternoon.
Thank you so much.